Welcome to Psychosynthesis Conversations, your channel for psychospiritual reflections and experiences. And now, to introduce you to our topic for today, here is your host, Kenneth Sorensen.
Today I had the pleasure and great honor of speaking with Anne-Marie Lamb. Anne-Marie is the former executive director of the Psykosynthesakademien in Stockholm from 2016 to 2019, where she managed the 4-year training program for psychosynthesis therapists. She's also a psychosynthesis therapist and supervisor with additional training in imago couples therapy, bibliotherapy, and energy psychology. She held positions as a board member of the EFPP, European Federation of Psychosynthesis Psychotherapy, from 2016 to 2019, and as a board member of Psykosynthesakademien from 2019 to 2023. She has a long career in the Swedish banking and finance industry at the executive level, and is the author and editor of the book An Anthology of Psychosynthesis for Life. Privately, she is the mother of 2 sons, married to an Englishman, and has lived in the UK and Denmark apart from her country of origin, Sweden. If you like these conversations, please help me spread the word by liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps me a lot to spread the word about psychosynthesis. Now, without further ado, I present to you Anne-Marie Lamb. Hi, Anne-Marie, and welcome to Psychosynthesis Conversation. I'm truly grateful to have you on, and I've so much look forward to it. So here you are, and I hope we will have a very good conversation.
Thank you, Kenneth. Do you want me to come in now, or shall I wait a bit?
Yes, we are on the fly. So
Yeah, so thank you back to you. I'm really grateful for the invitation and to be able to have this conversation with you on something that is, I know, that is deep to both our hearts and souls, which is psychosynthesis. So thank you for this time together.
Yeah. And we know each other a little bit, from the Scandinavian scene of psychosynthesis. You were the executive director of Psykosynthesakademien in Stockholm, Sweden. Is that not correct? For some years,
Yes.
where you did very good work out there with training new students to become psychosynthesis psychotherapists. So you have been active in several boards within the community, the EFPP, and so you are a very prominent voice in many respects. But before we go into your work, I would really love to hear a bit about your story. How did you come into psychosynthesis? What made that? Why did you make that decision?
Oh, well, that could be very long. So I'll try and keep it reasonably short. And I think that for like so many others, it was a crisis in my life. It wasn't a crisis that was very obvious or apparent in the outer world, but it certainly was a crisis within myself where I had to question who I was, how I was doing things, knowing in my mind that I was doing all the right things, and I was familiar with, how you reach goals and success. But really, I was stopped in my path.
Could you give some details about what type of work were you in? What was just a few data on your life circumstances?
Yes, sure. Yes, absolutely. I was working within human resources management, which is a lot of organizational development and a lot of leadership development. I was very fortunate. I had great opportunities. I worked very hard. And, I had, I suppose I had a strong top achiever within myself.
Yeah.
Really, if I can use that word, which is now familiar to me, but not then. I had no idea that I was just doing what I thought was meaningful as well, because what happened was that I was asked to do a group work in the bank. I was in the bank and finance sector where I was working. And I was asked to do work on group level to define a strategy for diversity and inclusion. Making it into a valuable and usable plan for success. Well, it held a lot of challenges. Because what became clear to me in this work was that it's not really about the targets we put. It's not really about the structure that I was quite, happy to produce. It was really about the cultural aspects and how we relate to other people and one another. Men and women, different ages. How easy is it for someone who is in their 50s to maybe have a new manager or leader who is just out of university or come in with new ideas and new energy and so on? There's usually a clash.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I see that from a psychosynthesis perspective of the polarities.
Yes.
There's always two.
Yeah, exactly. There's two to tango.
There's two, and there's two to tango, and there's always two polarities, and they can be in opposition. They can clash.
Yeah.
Can find a balance, or maybe even eventually find a synthesis, which is, a little bit of both. Anyway, I was in the clashing stage.
Yeah. Okay.
I was on one of the polarities.
Yes.
And in the setting where I was working, the energy was very much the other polarity. Let's just get a plan on board. And I said, but we know what to do. We've known what to do for years. This is something else. It's about, it's about ourselves. It's about every leader. Anyway, so it was really, truly a crisis of identity.
Yeah.
I had very strong drive and will. I became I could hear myself. I became quite angry and everything came out in an energy that I couldn't harness within myself. So it came out in anger or criticism or projection. And I meet that sometimes in people I work with. It's so easy to put the responsibility out there. Maybe it's someone else is doing it wrong, or the situation is wrong, or whatever. And there is a lovely quote by Viktor Frankl. See if I can collect it right now as we're sitting here. We cannot always change the outer circumstances, but we can always change our inner attitude to those circumstances.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I wasn't really ready for that then, so I kept on fighting for a long, long time. But eventually, this whole project worked out, and the personal relations that had become a bit strained, they also calmed down, and and we were able to meet, which was really very, very healing, I think, for two people, at least two of us. And all the people who wanted to give support just stepped in. When everything was done, there was huge love in the organization and gratitude. So from a psychosynthesis perspective, I would say there was always a higher purpose waiting to come through all this work. So
It almost seemed like you reached some kind of a synthesis out of these polarities you were caught up in.
I can see that now.
Yes.
But those 20 years ago, it took me a bit more to be able to see that. Anyway, the way I found the people who stepped in, it's there's another quote, see if I can find that. When the student is ready, the master steps in, or the teacher comes in. You are familiar with that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when all this was handed over and all that positive energy also appeared, to lift me up really and give me some kind of solace, because it was more painful than I can ever explain here in a short conversation. Let me tell you, it was a crisis, a deep crisis.
Yeah.
Which entailed a lot of prayer and a lot of desperation, dark nights and so on. But this thing about when you're ready, people appear, or the right thing appears, or if you're open to it, we have it's always there. It's always available to us if we're open to synchronicity, or we're open to trusting what comes our way.
I was speaking of some kind of a higher wisdom that start to appear and giving you new thoughts, new idea, new life directions, and so on.
Absolutely. But let me tell you, I could not define that then.
No.
I was very far from this, even though, Kenneth, I want to say that when I was young, I meditated. I had some peak experience that meant a lot to me when I was in my teens. So I had great trust in God or the universe with me through my life.
Yeah.
But it wasn't so active this stage. But I found meditation. I found a spiritual guide. I'll be honest with you here, and for everyone to know, what I found was a guide who could help me connect my behavior, my actions, who I showed myself in the world. It was very successful. I come back to that word. There was no problem really. The problem was in here. I was out of sync, and she helped me to come into sync.
And the she, was that a physical being, or I'm very open to all kinds of inner beings and helpers. So was that a physical person or an inner guide?
Let's be very honest here.
Okay, yes.
That's why we're meeting each other. It was, and it still is a physical person, but she facilitates. There is an impatient soul in me as well, who wants to go very, very quick, and this personality is so slow and wants to do other things.
It sounds like you speak out of my mouth.
So she is the guiding link. I have regular meetings with her once a month. And through that, through meditation and mindfulness, and really I had to train to meditate. you know. And my teacher then, this woman said to me, it'll be fine for you to meditate when you understand that meditation is not equal to achievement. It took a year for me to understand, you know, so I was very slow. It was as if I was so set in my head, you know, and the openness you need in life to live, to be able to enjoy nature, to be able to enjoy meetings and just simply being. That took me some time, but then I realized after a few years.
Were you still active in the financial sector at that time?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Oh yeah. Everything was going on in here, in my home life, in my family. You know, I often say that to clients I meet. It doesn't have to be such a, you know, rocket science. It doesn't have to manifest in any grandiose way. Start on the inside. Work outwards. You know, who else is going to make the changes in our lives? I know you talk a lot about self-mastery, and yes, who else? Who else? What else can decide truly who we want to be in life, how we want to express ourselves? So my life continued. Same husband.
So when you look back on that big crisis, and you know we speak about the emergence of new qualities through crisis, and if you look at your personality in that battle, in that particular battle that was so exhausting for you, what do you see you evolved? What came out of it? What new qualities or insights did you get from that that battle?
Well, qualities or insights, you know, I think I think I needed psychosynthesis for the true insights.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, you know, I was really happy meditating, working, being more relaxed, breathing instead of projecting. You know, I could sit in meetings and not be impatient anymore. I listened with great openness, more openness to everybody. I connected. I did that. I did it that way. I did it my way. You know, I went that way.
Yes.
I was really had a happy life. My
It's very,
children, you know, everyone. Sorry.
from my perspective, it really sounds like you went through a big conflict and out of it came more harmony. You know, this, harmony through conflict. That's the name on one of the rays, one of the energies.
I know, I love it. It's
So you think in some way you manage after that conflict to bring out more harmony in your life. Is that?
That is true, and it's interesting that you mentioned the rays or the different ways, you know, that we can express us, or the energies that belong perhaps more to the soul than our personality. And I had the privilege of studying in Oslo for 10 months, I think, almost a year, in something called energy psychology.
Yes.
That was after I did all the psychosynthesis training, but I had the privilege of doing that, and I know that.
I know a bit about that.
I know you know a bit about that. And that was for me, the greatest gift from that was realizing that, oh, you know, yes, I have this creative mind, and it can be very scattered in many ideas, or I can maybe meditate to bring more focus into my thinking and finding, you know, another harmony.
Exactly.
Which is I think what you're referring to, that through crisis, through chaos,
Mm.
We can work, I say, in this respect, with the spirit to achieve greater harmony within ourselves.
Exactly, yeah. So if we go now to when you decided to start psychosynthesis, and tell me a bit about why was it psychosynthesis that popped up in your mind? Was there anything particular with that psychology that resonated with you?
I had no idea, Kenneth. I didn't know, but I can encourage anyone who is searching to start looking, because one day I realized I need to ground myself. I can't,
Mm,
I'm very much for manifestation. I'm very much for bringing whatever connection you have within yourself with purpose or meaning or qualities of longing or whatever, finding ways of bringing it into the world,
mm,
expressing it in a directive way. I didn't know it then, but it's definitely part of psychosynthesis.
exactly.
But I working in the organizational setting that I was, I looked at Gestalt first. So I did a
Yes.
year's training of the methodology of Gestalt, in change work or whatever. It was wonderful. It's really, really good training for me. But in the first module, I sat there and I thought, this is really good. It will ground me in my work.
Mm,
But this is not what I need. This is not what I'm looking for. And then, wasn't there an Italian? Wasn't there someone? Didn't I see a picture sometime of, an old man with a white beard and smiling eyes and kind face? But didn't I see something? And I'm very grateful to the internet, and the Google.
yeah, me too.
So it was so easy to find. And
Mm,
that's how I found psychosynthesis in Stockholm. There was a week's training, 8 days, I think, then essentials, essential life skills.
mm,
What a promise.
mm. Yes, exactly. A
What a
very,
promise.
yes, essential life skills. I
Who
love that
doesn't,
title.
right? Who doesn't want essential life skills? I did.
Yes.
And I thought, well, fantastic, 8 days, and then I'll be done.
Mm. Yes, you thought.
um, and then I decided my last day, I decided, no, I'll do the first 2 years training.
Mm,
Then I'll be done.
mm,
I did that, and then I continued with the professional training. And I thought, why now? Because honestly, a lot of my life had already passed chronologically by that time.
mm. When did
That's
you, what year did you get into the training?
2009.
2009. Okay, yes.
It's 15 years ago.
Yes.
So 2005, I had my crisis and started
Mm,
meditating.
mm,
So it's 20 years.
yeah.
These life cycles follow us around.
Mm,
It's 20, 25 years now, and still counting. But I can honestly say that when I had finished the training and I was fortunate enough to be able to take this into client work, individual client work. But I also used it in my organizational setting within
mm,
the bank. You can use it skillfully,
mm.
skillful will, so much a part of psychosynthesis,
Yes, indeed.
connecting with people, including it into a setting in a gentle way.
Mm.
So it,
If you
yeah,
look upon the training you received and think about what was the most important insights or takeaways from the training and from the whole philosophy and approach human development. Was there anything that deeply resonated with you?
You know, I always come back to the will.
Mm.
It was such a revelation to me that, you know, the will that we have as an energy in ourselves to direct our choices in life
Mm.
Can have so many aspects. And in psychosynthesis, as you know, we talk about a strong will, skillful will, which is very useful in organizations when you're working with people, or around the kitchen, you know, the breakfast table at home, wherever it's useful.
Mm.
And the goodwill, which is a sort of, I think, for me at least, a link between the I, you know, the seat of my consciousness, where I'm free from any contents of stress or ideas or whatever, but the still and pure point within myself of consciousness, and the soul, the higher aspects, the higher self. And of course, the transpersonal will that comes in much strongly.
Yeah.
I love the will. I think it's a, you know, it's a part of psychosynthesis, which of course has been expressed, not least through Roberto Assagioli's book on the will, which is available still in print, available for students of many nationalities and languages. But also through many practitioners who have continued working with the will. I love that.
If you should describe the will for a person who never heard about it, what's the phenomenology, logical experience of the will? How do you experience your will within you? You call it an energy.
Yeah. I would probably be awkward and start a little bit with identity first, you know. Who feels this energy? Who owns this energy of the will? Is it the strong achiever within you? Or is it the shy the shy one? Who uses the will, which is an energy that we can observe within ourselves? You know, where do I want to put this force within me? Do I want to direct it that way or that way? You can control your will, but you need to really be disidentified, which is another term. You need to have found different aspects of your personality, and you have to be able to communicate with them in a new way, knowing who is in charge, you know.
Exactly, yeah. Because what you point to there, I find very interesting, because often the situation is that people are identified with a powerful subpersonality, and it can be the ambitious one, and then this subpersonality use the power of the will to achieve its goals. But you can say that in that way, the will is hijacked in some way, because the will should be free. From one point of view, you can say the will should be free, because when it's free, then it can make the best choices. And as long as we are very identified with a particular identity of us, be it our role as parent, or our work role, or our teaching role, or whatever we identify with, then we limit the capacity of the will. But that's a really, really hard work to work with that disidentification that you are pointing to. So it is in many respects a mystery, the will. It's a reality because we feel its power and its insistence of us being us. I used to call it the will to be me or the will to be you, because it is a will that in some respect insists on bringing out the authentic being in you. And in the beginning, then we use these different roles and sub-personalities, but later on we can get closer into the center when we start observing and we start finding this place within where we can be disidentified and start listening to the deeper aspects of us. Does that resonate with you, that way of speaking about the world?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it really is a gem within psychosynthesis. This, and if it is a gem, it has different facets. Do you say facets?
Yes, facets.
So you can look at it from so many different ways and find new colors, new aspects, new ways of expressing who you are. So yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. But
yes.
No. You come in.
Because this brings me to perhaps to another reflection, because psychosynthesis is known for, the use or the activation of the will. When we compare psychosynthesis to many other modalities, very often it's based on talking therapy. You're giving the client insights, and insights, it's good, it's the basis, but very often there's no follow-up. There's no plan to achieve the goal. But in psychosynthesis, we also have a suggestion to the client to develop their will, to take action in their life. And as I usually speak about the development of the psychological functions, because very often we have obstacles in our life due to inefficient psychological functions, or perhaps we are overdeveloped our mind, or perhaps we are too emotional. And in order to balance that situation, we have to develop some of the deficient faculties in us.
Yeah.
So and some people have said, is psychosynthesis coaching? Because coaching, there's a lot of use of the will, but it's very much deeper than coaching. But it applies some of the same active principles. And I wonder, how did you apply that? You have been the boss or the director at the Psykosynthesis Academy and had the responsibility of training a lot of young people in this. How did you do that?
Well, the thing is, I wasn't a trainer. I was a director, and I was really responsible for. There was a call to save something that was about to collapse. So it was really the good old hero within me who stepped into crisis and chaos and to create something for the future that was that could hold both love and will. There can be too much love, there can be too much will. You have to have a balance between.
Wow, yes.
So
how does that play out in an organization? If there's too much love or too much will, what's the symptoms of that?
Well, there are light and dark aspects of both.
Yeah.
So really, it is the shadow aspects that you have to work with and build on the positive aspects of cooperation and so on. And then the shadow aspect of cooperation, of course, could be little groups, groups within the organization, groups within the groups, or I call it shadow work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shadow work you have to do in organizations always.
How would you define the shadow of love?
Ooh, it can be. I can say I have so many good examples right now from my
Oh.
personal life, because my husband and I, we have for 6 months, 7 months, or whatever, we have cleared our home to move to something which is much smaller than this, but big enough for us to have lots of space. And however evolved one of us is, or both of us, we step into our shadows. My shadow is definitely the will and the project leader. So I become the project leader, and I'm not very nice to know. And my husband steps into the shadow side of his love, which is wanting to do everything. And as a good project leader, it cannot be done that way.
Yeah.
But conversations are not as they normally are. They become much shorter and sharper. So you have to know yourself.
Yeah.
And I can recognize this. And in an organization, for instance, you can say that, well, if there's too much love, nothing will ever happen. You can swim in a sea of love and sink. You need someone to put a boat on the ocean, and give you oars to row with and say, let's go this way, let's try this, let's aim for something which will take us where we want to go. And in this case, I think the academy was ready for, stepping into the future more. So it was important to also find young trainers who could step in, which is why I certainly wouldn't be the one to start training, even though I love training, I love I love working with groups, but I wasn't the one to take it to the future. That was younger people. Thank goodness that the teacher group was so solid. They knew each other. They worked together for a long time. Very, very experienced, very dedicated people with great love and purpose. So they took on trainees.
So would you say an organization that has an imbalance of love or too much emphasis on love, they become a bit static, not dynamic? They tend to get stuck in the relationship and keep the relationship as they are, not want to hurt anyone, so not taking too many unpopular decisions. Is that the dynamic that plays out in a organization that perhaps has overdevelopment of love?
Well, it can, yes, it's true, it's that, but it can also be channeled in another way, through just talking.
Oh, yes,
Right?
talking about doing.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah. So I'm not an expert on this and not a guru, but this is what I've met. So this is from my perspective. I don't want to set myself up as an expert on this, but certainly I have met this so many times. Yes,
we are allowed to just reflect here, and the synthesis of love and will is very primary in psychosynthesis. So of course we need to see how it plays out in our families, our relationship, and also in groups and organizations.
Yeah,
I think it's
with
very important to, yeah, give insights into these dynamics.
I love the fact that Assagioli introduced love and will. He wasn't the first one, he's not the only one, but he does talk about love and will
Yeah.
as the two great energies
Mm.
in our lives.
Yeah.
And uh, yeah, I think it's I think there is a lot in the world right now. We can talk about if we had another conversation, but where polarities and will come out in very destructive and
Mm.
painful ways for people and for the planet.
Mm.
So certainly love is needed all around, love and goodwill. So if anyone ever wants to meditate, those are qualities that one can bring into one's own meditation to, because I think everything starts within ourselves.
Mm.
If 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 I have if I have found a balance in myself of love and will, even if it's only for short minutes or moments in life, in that moment I will touch someone else's life
Mm.
with that.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be grandiose. I think
Mm.
that's my main taking from psychosynthesis. It is absolutely uh, unfathomable, but it's not grandiose. It
No.
has nothing to do with the ego. It has everything to do with how you want to be,
Mm.
who you want to be, how you want to express yourself, and keeping check on your own self-awareness. Who do I get when things get tough? What role do I step into? What energy comes natural to me?
Mm.
Which was once part of maybe of my survival personality.
Mm.
You have to know yourself a lot.
Mm.
So working with clients, I often, I realized it takes a long time to just work on building the identity and the awareness of the different aspects of the personality in a very dynamic way.
Yeah.
Because emotions are dynamic. And what you talked about before was the star of functions. You didn't mention that word,
Mm.
but you talked about the different, we have so many aspects of our personality, functions of our personality. And Assagioli, who was an incredibly intelligent and loving man, I must say.
Mm.
He gave us a few models, and they can be used
Mm.
for such deep work.
I really agree. And when I sit here with you and reflect on love and will, and especially in my own life, I see, and sometimes in some roles in my work, I'm more dominant will, and I tend to push myself too much. And sometimes then I get some stress, and my old inclination is then to push even harder, just to to get
To
rid of
get it done, it.
this work. And it's simply not functioning. But
No.
it's really difficult then to move over to the love part. And love is for me all about also having trust in I am part of a greater community. I'm part of a larger being of life that will also take part in this world or work. And I don't have to do it all, because the will often gets so isolated and think that it's me that is going to do all the work. So I have this dance between these two polarities, and it's very often it's only when I go, too far out in one direction that I notice, I become aware. Okay, Kenna, now you really have to take a break and calm down, because the quality of work is not that good when you work from hypertension or in a stressful situation. So I think his model about finding a balance between love and will is extremely useful. And then in other capacities, in other ways in my life, perhaps in my relation to my daughter, I'm much more just relaxed and see where she will go. And sometimes I should actually be more directing, because she's going to be the boss of it all, and that's not a good situation. So I find myself, stuck in these polarities and struggling, but gradually finding my place in the middle where I can use both of the energies.
Yeah, Kenneth, I think that it's very insightful. I think it we'll have that through life. The balance and the dance of the opposites within ourselves. But psychosynthesis is a brilliant help and support in looking at what goes on in our inner world or psyche or personality. Whether we combine it with more dynamic aspect of what goes on in the body and the feeling and the role playing. There are so many active ways of exploring, but there is also meditation.
Yeah.
So there is peaceful work with meditation and building awareness, but there's also dynamic and active inner work, whether it's in a group, in a training, or in therapy. And I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Assagioli speaks of the 7 core areas of psychosynthesis as how we experience the 7
it's 7
areas.
core experiences. Yes.
Yeah, we don't really learn them. We don't teach them as such, but through exploring, through experience, we come into contact, we increase our awareness, and through that we can make a choice or a decision from a completely new place within ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can't, it's not done in a day. And if you start late in life, like I did, you can ask yourself, why now? But you do it when you do it. Some people are in their teens or 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or whatever. I meet people who are older than that sometimes.
Exactly. I think you point to something very important, because the 7 core experiences, or the 7 core concepts of psychosynthesis, which is the backbone, or what I call the soul of psychosynthesis, is actually reality waiting to be discovered. It is the reality of disidentification. And, this is something that the clients I work with really value. The first time they have an experience of disidentification, that their sub-personality, their identification with the anger suddenly loosened a bit, and they can start looking at it and seeing it, wow, this part of me is not all of me. I have the ability to be present to it. So these 7 experiences, as I really like to see, they are reality waiting to be discovered. And the self, the personal self, is a reality of being a pure consciousness and the presence, a present observer. The will is the experience of finding one's power to be oneself. And the ideal model is the reality of progress through a focus, an ideal model. And so all the others are realities. And I find that so fascinating, that the psychology that we are working on is, pointing people to that reality which lies dormant in anyone. And some will never receive any psychosynthesis training. They will just discover it, because it is reality. So that's how I like to see it.
Yeah, it's lovely to hear your passion for this and your enthusiasm, which has
I'm
been,
very passionate about that.
I love hearing you talk about that now, because I've followed since I started at the Academy in 2009. I searched for knowledge, I wanted to know more, and I found this site in Denmark. It was a long time ago, and it was called the Kentau.
Yeah, that's right. That was my first website, yes.
I think that was the embryo to your continued work. And even then, Kenneth, you were the one who shared all the links to all the pamphlets, all the lectures, all the different works of Assagioli that hadn't been published in books. So through that, I learned a lot. So I think we share the same passion, but I think an important quality, which is not stressed enough, I don't think, if you work with people, or if you work with personal development, or maybe even transpersonal development, which holds a promise so much greater than anything you can set your goal to. You can hardly set a goal on that, the possibilities. And it's curiosity. As a therapist, as an individual, you have to be a little curious to find out more. You have to find out more about yourself whenever ready. And it is as it should. There is a beautiful poem in Sweden, I won't read that now, but by someone called Thomas Tranströmer, who won the Nobel Prize. He talks about this, vault after vault open within you. And you're never done, you're never finished. And it is as it should be. You have to be curious to find out more. And you have to be willing to look into the dark corners. And you mustn't be afraid to step into the light. Because often it's fear that makes us smaller than we really are.
Yeah, exactly.
And so curiosity. And I think it was one of the great management consultants whom I read several years ago, Stephen Covey. I don't know if you read him. Anyway, I think it was him, Stephen Covey.
With the 7 Habits?
Yes, of successful organizations of people. And I think he was said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think that is really something for every therapist to work within themselves, at least if you're a psychosynthesis therapist, because you can never guide anyone else or meet anyone else somewhere where you haven't yourself been.
Travel, that's for sure. And I really think you speak to the inventive spirit of psychosynthesis.
Yes.
And Assagioli was fond of saying that he endeavored to see each person as a living soul. And if we see each person in front of us as a living soul, then it's a wonderful mystery in front of us, because as you just put it, there's so many layers in there. And if the soul cannot make us curious, the soul in another, what can? I think that's been the greatest inspiration for me with all those clients I've had through the years, and see them opening up, transforming, changing, and finding new resources within. And because psychosynthesis carries such a broad vision, the vision of what we may be, then our gaze on the other becomes so inclusive, because there's room for everything. There's room for the heights and the light, and there's room, as you say, for all the darkness. And to to be that loving space for another person is so really important.
I think it is, and also to be humble enough
Mm.
to realize that some of the terminology can be very difficult for someone to take to their heart,
Yeah,
because it's intangible.
yeah,
Spirit, soul, it's intangible. It's, you can be in touch, you can be hesitant to use the word. I often ask, how are you with this term? Well, how do you look at, with my clients? How would you describe meaning in life?
yeah,
What is meaningful for you?
yeah,
Where do you find meaning?
yeah,
Where do you feel your heart sing? Where is your happy place? Through that, we often get permission
mm.
to use the word soul
Mm.
together.
Mm.
But like Assagioli himself, he refrained from using the word soul.
Mm.
If I understand rightly, he used the word higher self
Yeah,
because he did not want psychosynthesis to be identified with any religious dogma or any
exactly.
religious confinement or restriction or ideas.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be free and open. So I think you have to be very intuitive in meeting other
It's
people.
actually empathy. I will say that you have to understand the person you sit in
Yeah,
front of and step into the shoes of that person and
true.
start using the language of that person, so we can broaden the horizon within the language and the theories and the conviction that that person have, because you don't have to be religious in order to be spiritual. I find also I have been with materialistic people with a big good heart doing tons
Yes,
of beautiful work in the world, and
I know.
they would not call themselves neither spiritual nor religious, but they have just a big passion to do good. And in
Yeah.
my interpretation of that's a spiritual person, even though they would not confine themselves to that
Yes,
terminology.
I agree, totally agree with you. I remember one of the uh, uh, top executives that I was working with in my previous line of business, and we had some really good deepening conversations. And I asked him once, but if you, he was very analytical. He was a top executive in it,
Yes,
you know.
yes.
Anyway, I was, but is there any value that you feel you can stand up for
Mm,
that is really true to you? And then he said, "Oh, it was something my father taught me, and it was do your best, do what you think is best for everything, for everyone, even when no one is watching.
mm,
So stand up for what you believe is right,
mm.
even if there isn't an audience.
Yeah.
And if there is an audience or if there is a need somewhere, you can do so much good
Mm,
just by focusing your energy to, working the ground, helping someone who, um, yeah, needs help in whatever way. There
mm,
are many ways. I before this, I looked for a quote because I thought I want to say this in my conversation with Kenneth, because I want it to be said loud and clear. It's not by Assagioli, and it's not even by someone from psychosynthesis, but it connects to what you and I are talking about right now.
mm.
It's Teilhard de Chardin. Teilhard de Chardin, he was a French philosopher, and known for a lot of things that I won't go into. But anyway, you can Google, but he said, you are not a human being in search of a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being immersed in a human experience. Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, very, very wonderful. Yes, I read a book about him. From him, The Phenomenon of Man. I'm quite sure it's called, because I noticed that Assagioli also was quoting him, because he also had this conception of evolution, toward an omega point. So he was a very, very insightful person, that's for sure.
Yes, yeah. So I think that's at the core of psychosynthesis.
So we are a spiritual experience in search of a human
immersed,
yes.
living a human experience.
Yeah, living a human experience, yes. Yeah, it turns it upside down.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
And it's something you can also bring into if you have a training or if you work with a group, a development group where they are searching for new answers, or in a therapy session with individuals or couples or whatever. What is the meaning? What is the purpose? What is the longing, and why is it important? Psychosynthesis holds, gives us the tool to dig. We have so many tools to dig, to lighten up that which is hidden in our past or in the memories that we carry deep inside ourselves without knowing. And to lift everything to a level of awareness and consciousness.
Yeah. I really think you synthesize it there, because this is what it's all about, bring people into greater awareness, and then they will realize they are the awareness. I am consciousness itself. And I think you also said that this training you started, it was giving you life skills, the essential life skills. And I love that about psychosynthesis, because it's not just about insights. No, it's about giving the client life skills to live the good life according to their own values. And these skills are an ability to disidentify, an ability to be present and aware to what's going on in them, an ability to make wise choices and set a focus, and an ability to also reach up to the farther reaches of their human nature. And all these skills is part of the package of psychosynthesis. And I think there's not anything better we can contribute than integrated human beings that are in connection with their calling, because they will simply be forces for good wherever they are.
Yeah, I was listening to you now, and I agree with every word. And then I thought, did you say identity, or did you say disidentifying from? Did you add identity or not? Because I think it is truly important to use the word identity.
Yes, I definitely, it is.
Maybe you did and I missed it.
But that's good. Let's reinforce it. Yes, of course, it's not just disidentification. It's definitely identification with yourself as consciousness. That's the I, that's the self, and later it's the higher self, because it is the self-identification exercise actually that we are doing.
Yes, that's what we're doing. And I think when I refer back to the fact that I meet individual clients, very, very often someone comes in with this issue. I really want to know who I am. I just want to know myself.
Welcome in the club.
lifelong. I say,
Yes.
well, you're in for a good ride and it will never end. But it's I think it's something that every human being shares. This just longing to know more of who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I?
I think this is a very good point to take it to the next level. I usually ask the question: is there anything we haven't talked about that you have on your mind that you find important before we go to the exercise that we have planned? But are there any important element we have left out?
Well, not that I can think of right now. I just want to say, has it been very, very clear that I am a lifelong, endless student of psychosynthesis, and that I, invite so many more to come into this this way of living your life, because that is really what it is. I mean, as Assagioli himself said, the purpose of every therapy is for the client to be their own therapist, and the tools are there. So it's really so.
But Anne-Marie, there is a question that comes up,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
if people would like to start a training and would like to come to Stockholm, could you say a few words about the program that you are offering there? I know you are not any longer in any leadership position there, but then still, as far as I recall, is it not a 5-year program they are offering, or is it a 4-year program?
No, it is a 4-year program.
Okay.
It's still essentials. That's a 5-day course.
Yeah.
And for many people, that sets them on the road, and they're, something happens in life, and they make use of what they've experienced and learned and insights. But then if you want to go on, it's a 4-year course. 2 years is the, personal development, I would call it.
Yeah.
It has a name of inner leadership program, and I think it's wonderful because it's about self-leadership or inner leadership. That's what it is, because of the will. Self-mastery. I love that. It's about the I and the will and so on. So, and then you have an option after 2 years. Now I think they're introducing a 6-month training in coaching, psychosynthesis coaching, as an option.
Yeah.
As an option for those who do not want to go deep into psychosynthesis and do the professional therapy.
Yeah.
Training as a therapist. Unfortunately, in Sweden, we can't call ourselves psychotherapists.
No.
We are psychosynthesis therapists in Sweden.
Yeah.
But when you're trained at the academy, you have the letters PSA after your name to show that it is this 4-year training based on the European standards.
Yeah.
So that you can do. And then there are several trainings or courses offered on the side. There is a supervision training right now. There will be new supervisors examined in, I don't know, a few months. They've done. I did that training myself a few years ago when I left the academy. There is also a concept called the arena, where people like myself or someone else can come in and offer, that particular way of working with psychosynthesis, either as a continued training for therapists or with individuals who want to explore that particular field. So a lot is happening, and it's a very vital and vibrant organization.
So after the 2 years, the inner leadership, then comes a 2-year module where they train to be a therapist with all the client work and stuff like that. Yes.
It's a whole year of training in groups with supervision.
Yeah.
and theory, and there's a lot of examination, and then the last year is more theory, and then you start meeting clients
Yeah.
under supervision.
Yes. Okay. Great. And now you have something, yeah, for me and the viewers of this. We always conclude
Yeah.
the conversation with an exercise, because this is a way of showing psychosynthesis in live practice. So,
Yeah.
what have you in store for us?
Well, you asked me that before, and we haven't talked about it. So there are so many exercises that we can choose from. The treasure that Roberto Assagioli has produced, and several others, Piero Ferrucci, Diana Whitmore, there are wonderful exercises that can be used, meditation exercises in this case. But I thought about, I did think about love and will, actually,
Wow.
and how one can offer in therapy or for oneself a simple way of deepening the response to a question. For instance, if someone comes to me and they say, I want to know myself better, then that is for me a question. We can call it a seed question.
Yes.
That I use. And I use it in the way that I will now try and guide you all. So there will be, with that question, there will be 5 stages of going deeper. Each time, in the meditation, finding why is it important for me to get to know myself better? And then you meditate for a little while on that. And then you ask yourself, you get an answer. It is important for me because.
Yeah.
And you can stop there, but not if you're in therapy.
No.
So you take that answer. And that is important for me because you take it into, 5 meditations, 5 questionings, 5 answers, and then you get to the ultimate, the 5th answer. And that can be either very moving and very touchy, at best, or at least very, very useful to continue working with. So the question is, Kenneth, because I'm looking at the watch here, so I don't want to overstay. But shall I do? Just a simple disidentification first. Do you think that is useful or not?
Absolutely. I think that would be very useful.
Okay. I'll do that then. So we'll start by doing a disidentification and then go on to this, which I have never done online, but I will step into it.
Good.
So, Kenneth, as always, seat yourself in a comfortable position. And if you haven't already done so, just take a deep breath, close your eyes, and find a place within yourself to start this work from, this gentle work. Breathing will take you deeper. The breathing in, breathing out will be your anchor to come back to. If your attention will wander a bit. You are seated comfortably. If there are any tensions, just loosen them up with your breath. And we will do a disidentification exercise first. So take 3 quieting breaths and gradually deepen the breathing, your breathing, to a slow rhythm in which you feel at ease. And now say to yourself, I have put my physical body into a comfortable and relaxed position. I have a physical body, but I and my body are not the same. I have told it what to do. It is not myself. I have feelings and emotions, but I am not my emotions. They are changing and contradictory, and since I can observe them and often be in charge of them, it is evident that they are not myself. I have emotions, but I am not my emotions. I have a mind, but I am not my mind. It is active and often undisciplined, but I can control it and direct it, and so it is not myself. I have a mind, but I am not my mind. Let yourself pause here and follow this process of disidentification of the I from the various aspects of the body and your personal psyche. And now we come to the stage of recognition of the self at the center, holding your consciousness at a still and central point, affirm. I recognize and affirm that I am a center of pure self-consciousness. From this center, I'm capable of observing, controlling, directing, and using all my psychological processes, my thoughts, emotions, and physical body. I am the self, a center of will and of pure self-consciousness. And now let me gently start this exercise, this meditation, this inner exploration. And I will introduce a seed thought to start the meditation, a thought that you will bring with you into the different stages of this meditation. And that will be, may love and will both find a place in me. May love and will both find a place in me. When you say the words of your longing, this will be the first step of this exercise, defining the issue you will explore, beginning to open up whatever will come through from the unconscious into your awareness. Let this seed thought of may love and will both find a place in me. Find a place to rest within. Imagine that you can deepen the question and answer it in an inner dialogue with yourself. Just trust the process. Try not to be as smart as you normally are. Just let yourself breathe and remain inside in awareness. Again, may love and will both find a place in me. And then, for the first time, ask yourself the question, why is this important to me? Why is this important to me? Rest into the answer. Let your answer find its way gently, through an image, through words, whatever comes natural to you. Rest a moment with what is now in your awareness, finding your answer to the question or to your seed thoughts in a few words. A statement. This is important. The answer you give yourself, this is important to me because. This is important to me because. And then rest into the answer that will come to you from yourself. This is important to me because. And you get a new answer to that question. A short sentence, it could be an image, an answer, a statement. This is important to me. This is important to me. This new answer is important to me because. And rest into that. You ask yourself again, why is this important to me? And you let a new image or a new word or a new sentence emerge. And you take that and you ask, you say again a statement. This is important to me because. And you take that statement and ask yourself again, but why is that important to me? And you do the same again for the fifth and final time. You take the answer you just gave yourself and say it again. And this is important to me because. This is important to me because. Yeah, that was the ultimate answer to the question of why it is important for you that love and will both find a place in you. And when you are ready, bring that final answer back with you into the room. And if, when you're ready, you have opened your eyes and you have maybe a paper nearby, you can do this later. Just write two just draw two large circles on a piece of paper and let them overlap in the middle. And let the left circle be love and let the right circle be will. And where they overlap in the middle and form an almond-shaped symbol, that is where the ultimate answer has its place. And that will be a mandala for you, your mandala of love and will. I forgot to remind everyone to take some paper, but you can do that.
I have the paper and a pen.
I know you have, yeah. Two circles overlapping in the middle. Write your answers, images, or whatever. And the ultimate, this is important to me because in the middle.
Yes, I was not able to go further than 2 levels. I find it a very, very deep meditation, and it is some kind of reflective meditation.
It is reflective and creative. So maybe it's a little difficult to hold in a setting like this. And when I cannot go in and say, and ask for the answer and use the answer in the meditation, which is the normal way of guiding. So your answer is that this is important to you because, and then you take that a level again. And why is that important to you? A new answer. So I can understand that. It is a little challenging.
But I definitely got some good thoughts out of it. And to the first question, why is love and will important to me? I had the sense feeling, but also an image of will gives me agency and love gives me communion. And it was some kind of a sense of how they were not separated. They were in some way, they were two, one coin with two aspects. I need individuality in life in order to express myself, and that's the will part, that's the agency. But that realization of agency also gives me an insight into I'm part of a network, I'm part of a huge communion with all living beings. And the next question to why is that important, then I just came to life. Our life itself, and in some way it was the synthesis of love and will. There was just one pulsating life through all the universe, and there was just I could not dive enough into it to let go of it. So I just know I have to experience this. I have to go into this and contemplate this. So the other questions, just went over my head because I was so stuck at this level. But it was okay. This was where I would like to be.
You got the synthesis. It doesn't matter about the levels. Sometimes 5, you get to a different point, you have to work again, but sometimes it's very moving. And I felt very moved when you said, oh, it's life itself, and I thought, I could sense straight away that it touched me. Yes, it's life itself. May love and will find a place within you, and it's life itself.
Yeah.
What more can we ask?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. If people want to connect with you, of course, I can leave your link and your phone numbers and emails or whatever you like in the description of the video. But could you say here, do you have a website or?
Yes and no. I used to have one, but I've taken it away because I am changing. I have changed. I've transformed some of my, way of working. I work differently. I don't offer coaching anymore.
No.
I don't offer big work in groups and organizations. So I have in front of me an opportunity to just create a very, very simple web page. But when it is created, it will still be Heartwise, which is the name of the company that I have now made into a smaller company.
Yeah.
I don't want too much. I usually say I don't want too much hullabaloo. I want spirit work, transpersonal work, the work that helps people to transcend into who they really are. So, but my email address, put that there. They will find me on my email if you want to put my mobile. Encourage people to send an SMS because I don't respond to unidentified calls. Or if I do, it's just on an intuitive decision.
Oh,
Sometimes
there's
right.
one more. I never respond to unidentified phone calls.
No, I don't.
No,
I don't
don't
want
like
too
that.
much.
Huh?
No,
Okay.
I drown in phone calls. I don't want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So send an SMS if you want to, and if I answer, it's pure intuition, and sometimes that's right.
Okay, thank you so much for your participation here and for everything you offered. It has been really a blessing to be in company with you. So all the best to you and all the best of luck to your new
Kenneth,
life.
thank you from the bottom of my everything.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
for this meeting.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Psychosynthesis Conversations. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and help us to spread the wisdom.